50,000 German soldiers surrendered in a single day, and Hitler's reaction shocked even his own generals. Under a sky bruised purple by the last hours of daylight, the battered roads of Lorraine crawled with American armor. Engines growled, treads clattered, and the dust carried the metallic taste of war. Rumors surged through the 2nd Armored Division faster than any runner could sprint. Patton's boys were moving again, faster than headquarters expected, faster than the Germans believed possible, and, if the whispers were true, toward the possibility of a decisive breakthrough. But few imagined the scale of what was about to happen, or what words would be uttered in Berlin when word finally arrived that in a single day, 50,000 German soldiers had laid down their arms to one relentless American general. George S. Patton stood on the glacis plate of a Sherman, binoculars pressed to his eyes, scanning the distant French valley. The wind whipped his scarf and the lenses flashed with a predatory gleam. "They're running," he muttered, voice low and satisfied. "Running or surrendering. Hell of a choice." His aide, Captain Robert Stiller, scribbled frantically on a clipboard, trying to track the growing streams of prisoners being herded north toward provisional cages. Columns of Wehrmacht soldiers marched with helmets dangling from their fingers, their boots caked in mud and winter frost. Some limped, some stared blankly, and every few minutes another platoon stumbled out of the tree line, an officer waving a makeshift white flag fashioned from a shirt, a bandage, a torn piece of parachute silk, whatever they could find to admit the end. Patton ordered no pause. Instead, he pushed the armor forward, past stunned infantrymen, past abandoned supply trucks, past horses still harnessed to caissons. The Germans had been caught between a merciless logistical chase and the realization that Hitler's promises of final victory were dissolving into hallucination. What began as pockets of surrender became belts, and belts became rivers of men without rifles, without fight, without hope. By noon the count, if anyone trusted it, hovered around 25,000. By dusk, the ticker crossed 50. Even Stiller, normally unfazed by Patton's appetite for numbers and pace, stared dumbstruck at the sheet in his hand. 50,000 prisoners in one day, sir, he whispered. If this holds, it'll be a record. Patton grinned. Then we'll hold it. Soldiers laughed, but it was nervous laughter. No one had ever imagined capturing an army as if scooping water in bare hands. And somewhere, though nobody on the French road knew yet, Berlin was already receiving fragmented radio reports. They arrived scrambled, breathless, raw with disbelief, as corps commanders tried to explain that whole divisions had dissolved like salt in rain. A young signals officer pressed headphones tight against his ears as static hissed and bursts of English and German collided on the ether. The news traveled upward until it reached the Wolfschanz bunker complex in East Prussia. Hitler was pacing when the first clear report was placed on the table. His right hand trembled, the old tremor, the one he tried to hide, and his eyes darted from the page to the colonels standing at attention. According to the stenographer who recorded the exchange, there was a long silence, the corpse still kind that made grown men swallow before breathing. Then, with clipped precision, Hitler spoke. "So," he said, "the American cowboy has taken 50,000 of my soldiers in a single day." His lips pressed into a thin line. 50,000 Germans captured, without a great battle, without resistance worthy of the Reich. He slammed his fist once, not in rage, but in a theatrical gesture of contempt. Patton, always Patton. A bastard of speed. A barbarian of mobility. The general said little, knowing too well that comment was invitation to doom. Hitler leaned over the map, studying the arrows converging on the Rhine. "It is not the loss of men that troubles me," he continued. "It is what this will tell the world. They will say the German army surrenders now like peasants flee a storm. They will say America has produced a new Hannibal, a master of maneuver." Patton moves as if the roads belong to him. He does not wait. He does not ask permission. He attacks, always attacks. A colonel dared to speak. "Mein Führer, the formations in Lorraine were depleted." Supplies. Hitler cut him off. "Excuses are for the defeated. And today, gentlemen, we are defeated." Outside the bunker, the pines swayed in cold wind. Hitler lowered himself into a chair and stared not at the map but into some depth only he could see. 50,000 captured, he whispered again, quieter this time, as if the number itself injured him. "It is a humiliation. And humiliation spreads faster than fear. Back on the Western Front, Patton hardly paused long enough to reflect on what Berlin might be thinking. For him, the surrender of 50,000 men was less a triumph of ego than a weapon, proof that the enemy had lost the will to fight. If the German army could be convinced it was beaten, the war could end months early. War, Patton once declared, is only partly fire. The rest is spirit. And here, in the villages of Lorraine, the German spirit was cracking. Among the prisoners walked a major named Klaus Riedel, a veteran of Poland, France, and the endless snows of Russia. He carried himself with dignity, even stripped of power. When an American lieutenant asked why he surrendered without a final stand, Riedel raised his chin. "We fought for 6 years," he said. "We fought armies and winters and shortages and commanders who confused fantasy for strategy. The army is tired. The Reich is tired. And Patton," he paused, as if choosing his words carefully, "Patton is not tired." Far behind the columns, Captain Stiller approached Patton again. "There are journalists asking for a statement, sir. They want to know what you'll tell the press about today." Patton lit a cigarette, exhaling a thin line of smoke. "Tell them I came to fight a war and the Germans came to end one." He smiled faintly. "Tell them speed kills." But the story did not end on the battlefield. It rippled outward, moving through Allied command, where Eisenhower raised his eyebrows at the figures, through London where Churchill muttered that Patton was indeed a magnificent butcher, and through Berlin where Hitler's bitterness fermented into poisonous resolve. That night, according to the stenographer's log, Hitler erupted again in private, railing against the army, against fate, against the American general whose name he hated to speak. "What does Patton believe?" Hitler growled. "That war is a race. That courage is measured in kilometers." He spat on the floor. "He fights like a gambler, like a highwayman, like a demon of motion. And our commanders, our once great commanders, cannot stop a demon." He paused, breathing hard. "If the German people must know something of this day, then let them know this: 50,000 men surrendered not to America, but to exhaustion. And exhaustion, gentlemen, is treason. Even Goebbels could not spin the numbers into glory. The propaganda ministry chose silence, hoping that silence might weigh less than disgrace. But soldiers on the Eastern Front heard the whispers, 50,000 in a day, and wondered whether the war they bled for was already lost. The rumor traveled through POW camps, through bombed-out rail stations, through every kitchen and cellar and smoking ruin where the Reich's civilians waited for the sound of boots that were not German. As for Patton, he spent the next morning studying maps again, his boots muddy, his temper sharp. The war gave no days of rest. If Berlin was stunned, it did not matter. Patton chased victory the way wolves chase scent, never slowing until the prey fell. Yet even he felt the weight of the moment as he overheard soldiers joking that the Germans would need trains, not trucks, to transport the surrender. "It's not over," he muttered, almost to himself. "But they know now. They know we're coming." Many years later, historians would argue about what Hitler truly said that evening, whether he named Patton a demon, a gambler, a cowboy, or some darker epithet. The exact phrasing mattered less than the sentiment. Patton's speed had wounded the pride of a man who believed war was shaped by will alone. 50,000 Germans in a single day proved otherwise. It proved that will breaks eventually, no matter how many speeches or threats or myths are piled atop it. And somewhere inside the collapsing Reich, Hitler realized that defeat would not arrive as a dramatic last stand in Berlin, but as a long procession of surrendered men marching not east but west, toward the very armies he once mocked as weak. In Lorraine the roads emptied at last, leaving only ruts in the mud and the quiet churn of tank engines cooling after a hard day's work. Patton mounted his jeep, goggles pulled low, boots thudding against metal. The front was still ahead, and the war still had horrors to spend. But for one day, one unforgettable day, 50,000 soldiers laid down their rifles, and the Third Army proved that speed and audacity could rewrite what everyone thought inevitable. Somewhere far from the battlefield, a voice in a bunker whispered bitterly about humiliation, about surrender, about a cowboy from America who fought wars like storms. And that whisper was the first concession, not of land or men or machinery, but of truth. The war was turning, and Hitler knew it.